All right, so I'll ask the room, do you guys want to watch the rest of this game, or should we get going with the book reading? Keep going? I'm not playing. This is a video. This is someone slower than me, I'd say. Hello. I'm Kyle, and I literally wrote the book on Minesweeper. Ooh. The book came out in May, courtesy of Boss Fight Books. Yeah? Any fans? Good. And I thought I'd talk a little bit today about what I found out about this incredible little game and why it deserves a whole book, which kind of surprised me as well, to be honest. So, show of hands, real quick, who here has played Minesweeper? I think that's everybody. Good, that will save a lot of time. Okay, now who first played on Windows 8 or before? Keep your hands up. Or before, Windows 8 or earlier. Okay, keep your hand up if it was Windows 7 or earlier. Windows Vista. Oh, we got old heads here. Okay, Windows XP. Is that your first one? No? Windows 95. Who played it on Windows 3.1? Oh, there we lost some people. All right, these are the real old heads, the 3.1 people. Look, these are your elders. Please respect them. All right, so I'm going to have a guessing game to start. I'm going to open up the floor. Of all those operating systems that came pre-installed with Minesweeper, how many copies of Minesweeper do you think Microsoft gave away over the years, pre-installed? I'll do higher or lower. Someone raise a hand. Yes? Trillions? Lower than trillions. Yes? 2 billion higher. Anyone? Yes? 4 billion. We got that quick. 4 billion copies of Minesweeper were distributed alongside Windows, and that doesn't even count the Windows Entertainment Pack copies that came before. Alongside Windows Solitaire, that makes Minesweeper easily one of the most widely distributed games in history. Now, of course, a lot of those copies were totally ignored, like those AOL demo discs that were around the same time, but a lot of them were not. Mediametrics in June 1998 said that 7 million active players were playing Minesweeper out of the 72.5 million home PCs in use at the time. So about 1 in 10 PC users of the day. And that's 8 years after its initial release, so that's pretty good. A similar game on the mobile platforms would be Candy Crush Saga, which had 327 million out of 3.5 billion smartphone players. So that gives you a little bit of idea of how ubiquitous Minesweeper was at the time, if you weren't there. But if anything, the impact Minesweeper had on the world of computer gaming is even larger than its massive player numbers would suggest. That's because the game's digital omnipresence came well before computer and video games had achieved their current cultural prominence. In 1990, when Minesweeper was first released as part of the Windows Entertainment Pack, the idea of playing a game on a computer wasn't exactly new, but computer games were still a relative niche, even among the already niche community of PC owners. Bruce Ryan, who served as a product manager for the Windows Entertainment Pack, recalled the general sentiment among many Microsoft business clients at the time. These are serious machines. Why would you buy them for such a frivolous activity? Keep your darn kids off the machine. Crowdsourced gaming database Moby Games lists only 584 commercial games that were released for MS-DOS in 1990. 18 more released for the brand new Windows OS, including the Windows Entertainment Pack, where Minesweeper made its debut in 1990. Compare that to the modern gaming market, where more than 8,000 PC games were released on Steam just in 2019, and you get some idea of what a different time it was for the medium, and that's, of course, outdated. The recent 2023 numbers, I think, are even higher, like 14,000. So, good luck playing them all. 15,500, thank you. I love being corrected by the audience. Charles Fitzgerald, who also served as a product manager on Windows Entertainment Pack, recalled the jokey tagline for the product circulating around Microsoft at the time. It's not the most fun you can have on Windows, it's the only fun you can have on Windows. In those days before widespread internet access, just getting your hands on the limited selection of PC games was also a significant hassle. Buying a computer game in the early 90s meant driving to a specialty store, squinting at a lot of big boxes to figure out which games were even compatible with your graphics or sound or monitor hardware and various controller peripherals. Back then, you probably had to spend about $40 or $50, which is $100 or up in today's money, on a big box that likely had multiple floppy disks worth of data, and then you had to drive home and figure out how to install it on your new acquisition. And that's before you even start to figure out how to play the game, which in those days meant likely pouring through a hefty manual for an explanation of a detailed simulation or a dense role-playing universe. But starting in 1992, Minesweeper's pre-installation on every Windows machine made it one of the few games that didn't require any time, money, or real effort to play on a PC. If you were sitting at a Windows computer during Minesweeper's heyday, you were probably no more than a few seconds away from a quick game, a fact that led to many unlikely gaming addicts throughout the 90s. A PC in your school's library probably had Minesweeper. The computer in your friend's mom's home office probably had Minesweeper. That display of new computers at the local Circuit City probably had Minesweeper for you to tinker with while your parents shopped. And I might be speaking from personal experience with all of those examples. Today, we take Minesweeper's brand of instant gaming access for granted. Any internet-connected computer with a web browser can load up thousands of games, including many Minesweeper clones, with nothing more than a quick search. Any smartphone can download tens of thousands of titles almost instantly, most of them free to play, at least initially. We all have easy access to more high-quality games than we could ever possibly play in one lifetime. But Minesweeper was one of the world's first opportunities to taste that kind of low-effort, quick-hit gaming access, released on a machine that most of the world still considered an expensive tool for spreadsheets and word processing. Its sudden presence on every Windows PC was so surprising that it ended up contributing to one of computer gaming's first cultural backlashes, as corporations and government officials fought back against an intrusion that they claimed sapped employee productivity and wasted taxpayer dollars. Today, many people think of Minesweeper as a simple distraction, best suited for the rare times when better games and internet access aren't available. But the game still boasts a tight community of competitive players who have developed new versions and bootstrapped their own self-contained governing bodies to adjudicate hard-fought, high-score competitions that continue to this day. And though Microsoft no longer includes the game with every copy of Windows, it still offers users a free downloadable version with modern features that reflect just how much game design, marketing, and monetization strategies have changed since 1990. So that gives you some idea of what you could read in the book. I'll go into more later. Everyone here know how to play Minesweeper? Yes? Anyone need an explanation? Okay, I'll go real quick. So here's a simple gameplay sample. The top left corner of the board is shown here. The ones indicate how many mines are adjacent, horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. So someone call out, where would you click in this situation? The X's, the Y's? Y's, that's right, because one of the X's is going to be a mine. That means neither of the Y's can be to satisfy that one on the right. So then you click on those, and then you can mark the spaces with the Z's, because there's a 3 there. There's 3 spots open to that top 3, so you know those have to be mines. You put flags there. And, the logical rules for determining where mines are or aren't get a little more complicated than that. But the basic deductive process remains the same. You use the squares that have been revealed to determine information about the squares that haven't been revealed. And I'm sure some of you are calling out in your brains where to click next, but I'll leave that for you guys to think about. So, well before Minesweeper, a few games used limited info to identify nearby threats in a similar way. MindOut, shown here, was one of the first that's identifiable as a direct Minesweeper ancestor. This is on the ZX Spectrum. Anyone play this game? Anyone have a ZX Spectrum? Yeah, I've never found anyone who. Maybe in Britain, I don't know. So you move through the minefield bottom to top in this one, and on each space when you're there, it tells you how many mines are nearby, but it doesn't use diagonals. It only uses vertical and horizontal adjacency. Also, the numbers go away when you step off, so you have to kind of remember what the number was or backtrack to see what it was. You'll see when the gameplay starts. That makes it a little tougher than the Minesweeper you might know. I talked to MindOut creator Ian Andrew about the game and its links to Minesweeper, and he said he was a little bit annoyed when he first encountered Minesweeper on his Windows PC. They're copying my idea, he told me. It's not that I criticize anybody for copying stuff, Andrew said, but I get much more of a buzz from creating new ideas. When I get a review, I get such a buzz when someone says, this is a new idea. You feel like you're giving something to the world. And, the fact that MindOut didn't sell 4 billion copies might have had something to do with that, too. So I'll just leave this for a second until we get this slow video to the gameplay and watch for a second. See if you can identify the early idea of Minesweeper here. I think that was added by the video editor. You can see the number of mines up at the top, 0, 1. Oh, look out. And then it gives you a replay to show just how badly you did. All right, you get the idea. So from there are a lot of games that resembled Mined Out pretty directly. They slowly added features, better user interface, mouse control, the ability to mark suspected mines. And then we come to the late 80s, early 90s, and enters Microsoft programmer Kurt Johnson, who used these games as the basis for a self-guided programming tutorial on OS2, Microsoft's other early 90s graphical user interface, now long forgotten. Anyone here use OS2 ever? Oh, we got a few. Okay. If you need OS2 help, they're the ones to go for. In the help file for the game, in the early prototypes at least, Johnson says he's directly inspired by the Mac version by Daniel Griscom, which was in turn inspired by the Sun Tools program by Tom Anderson. You can see that Mac version right there in the center. Might look pretty similar. That came out a year before Minesweeper, actually. Then there's Robert Donner. He was a Microsoft Office coder who was also trying to learn how to code in the brand new Windows. And he used Johnson's OS2 version as a basis for learning how to make his own version on Windows. Johnson's early prototypes actually had coins, which would save you from a mine if you found them, so you got kind of extra lives, but he removed them because he found they weren't really needed for most of the games. And the most interesting thing I found in those early prototypes was that Minesweeper had a story. Do you guys want to know what the story of Minesweeper was? Yeah. Congratulations! HQ has promoted you to Mine Detector 3rd Class. Your job is to discover the location of bombs in a minefield without being blown up. To do this, you are provided with 2 essential tools. One is the MSRM52057, Microsoft Remote Mine Proximity Detector, Model 520, version 57. The other is your foot. When you step on a square, the MSRM52057 scans the area around you, informing you about the number of surrounding mines. Unfortunately, this is the limit of its abilities. Due to budget cutbacks, it will not tell you in which direction the mines lay. This is what your foot is for. And you can see the icons I've put up here. The foot icon was when you were regularly playing, and if you lost, it would turn into that bloody stump icon there in black and white. It's probably for the best that they got rid of that. It's not really fitting with Microsoft's image at the time, I would say. So despite making a game that's become a household name, when I talked to Donner, he wasn't especially proud of his work on Minesweeper. I try to think more people have been positively affected by the work I did on Word, Office, and Windows. That always seemed more important and like it would have a larger impact. But regardless, when Donner finished his game, he posted it to the Microsoft internal network in early 1990, and it became an instant hit with the more technically minded staffers, according to people who worked there at the time. It also attracted one important backer that didn't usually play games, and I'll read from the book here a little bit. While Minesweeper love at Microsoft wasn't universal, the game managed to get its hooks into the most important backer a Microsoft game could have. Bill got addicted, as Fitzgerald put it bluntly. That's Bill Gates, of course, the billionaire Microsoft founder and CEO, though he was not yet the richest man in the world in 1990. Despite having money to spend on much more elaborate entertainments, in 1990 Gates found himself obsessed with dominating Johnson & Donner's simple Windows gaming experiment. Originally, I think I got a mail from Bill saying, "I just solved beginner Minesweeper in 10 seconds. Is that good?" Ryan recalled. I wrote back to him, I go, "Yeah, 10 seconds is really good. The record for us right now, I think, is 8. Apparently, the fact that the record was very close to where Bill Gates was led him to make it his mission to beat it. Ryan said Gates' Minesweeper addiction got so bad that he took it off his machine, but that wasn't enough to stop the CEO from getting his fix. Because the high scores were an easy-to-edit text file, we had a rule that somebody had to put eyes on your record score, Fitzgerald said. So it was one Sunday afternoon, we get email from Bill saying, "Hey, I think I just got a new high score. It's on the machine in short-lived Microsoft President Mike Hallman's office." And we were like, "What?" Ryan recalled the surreal experience of being called in by Bill Gates on a random weekend, only to cluster around another executive's computer and confirm a new Minesweeper high score of 5 seconds on a beginner board. This was early evening, so we went over there 7 at night. Hallman was a former Boeing executive, and he was not a humorful guy. So the idea that Bill is sitting there after work, going into the president's office so he could play Minesweeper, it was just weird imagery. That was when I realized how much valuable time a game could waste, Donner said, of hearing about Gates' multi-office record chase. So the broad outlines of Gates' brief Minesweeper addiction have been widely reported in press accounts, going back to at least a 1994 Washington Post article that I found. What hasn't been reported previously, as far as I can tell, is the extreme interventions some key employees took in an attempt to break Gates of his habit. Melinda French was a level above me, but we were in the same group within Microsoft, Ryan said. And if the name Melinda French sounds familiar, it's probably because she's now known as Melinda Gates, Bill's ex-wife and half of the namesake of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this is them at a basketball game in the early 90s. Bill's Minesweeper addiction took place about 4 years before their 1994 wedding, at a point when they were dating non-exclusively. As Ryan recalls, Melinda called Ryan into her office one day to ask a favor for the company. Please don't share with Bill advances in the Minesweeper record. The attention Bill was paying to the game, she said, was not a good thing. Bill has a lot of important decisions to make, and this should not be taking up his time. So Melinda's request foreshadowed years of Minesweeper productivity-sucking potential from countless office managers in the years to come. Rather than just keep the record a secret, though, Ryan eventually decided to use some early software automation to convince Bill that the Minesweeper record was forever out of reach. It dawned on me that if all the mines were clumped in the lower right-hand corner, it would clear the entire screen in just 1 or 0 seconds, Ryan said. You just have to play like a gazillion times to do this. To play a gazillion times, Ryan said he made use of a super primitive early Windows program called Macro Recorder. Any Macro Recorder fans? Yeah, one? Okay. Which would automatically click the corner of a fresh new Minesweeper game, then immediately click the new game button over and over. If you ever cleared the entire board, it would bring up a high score window at that point, so the new game reset wouldn't work, Ryan explained. So I set it there and then went off for a day of meetings, and 4 hours later, it had won in a single click while I was gone. It felt very efficient having done this while I wasn't even in the office. Ryan said he sent a screenshot of the new 1-second record, looked kind of like this, to Gates, an unbeatable time in a version of the game that erroneously started the timer at 1 instead of 0, and which didn't measure tenths of a second at all. Sorry, your 5-second record has been eclipsed permanently because I don't think you can beat 1 second, he recalled emailing to the CEO. Ryan never expected a response, but he said he vividly remembers seeing the reply at the top of his email box the next morning, because there are few things more terrifying to a Microsoft employee than an email from Bill Gates. There was no need for terror, though. Gates headed the email with the self-deprecating subject line, "Chairman displaced," and explained to the CC'd staff that an automated macro had beat his Minesweeper time once and for all. "My critical skills are being displaced by a computer," the email read, as Ryan recalled. "This technology thing is going too far. When machines can do things faster than people, how can we retain our human dignity?" For the Bill Gates of the time, Ryan said this sentiment sounded very poetic. This is a time when most emails were misspelled and sketchy. He actually spent some time thinking about this. It was like he was writing his tombstone or something. While the time might seem despairing without context, Ryan said he's sure Gates was being tongue-in-cheek. The next line was, "I guess I'll have to try the intermediate level." He basically decided, okay, let's see if there's one the machines can't beat me at. So that's a little bit from the book. I'll move on now to talk about, even though Minesweeper was popular within Microsoft, Microsoft wasn't a company really equipped to release it as a commercial game. It's hard to remember now in our Xbox-filled world that Microsoft's a major gaming company, but Microsoft really didn't do games in 1990. Flight Simulator was the closest thing it had, and that was more of a hobby for aviation obsessives. Do we have any Flight Simulator 1.0 players? Oh, I finally stumped you. All right, here's another excerpt. Before Windows 3.0, early versions of Windows included one pre-installed game, Reversey. Any Reversey fans? Yeah, there we go. The board game, which dates back to the 19th century and is sometimes marketed as Othello in modern times, uses an 8x8 board and special discs with 2 differently colored sides. Players take turns placing discs to sandwich their opponent's colored tiles between their own, flipping the sandwich tiles to their color in order to control more board space. Reversey wasn't a particularly inviting game to play on early versions of Windows, especially for single players who had to face off against a punishing AI that didn't allow much room for human learning. Reversey was one of those things you played once and you were like, okay, it's Reversey, Ryan said. There's no high score in Reversey. Today, the Windows version of Reversey is almost totally forgotten, proving that just being included in a popular Microsoft operating system isn't enough to guarantee a game's success. Solitaire, on the other hand, I know you've all played this, proved that the right pre-installed Windows game could become an absolute phenomenon. Before we shipped Windows, we knew everybody at Microsoft played Solitaire to an extraordinary extent, Ryan said. We killed lots of our own productivity with our own product, thank you very much. But we weren't sure when it went out into the world what that would be like. Microsoft was a very atypical company back then. Solitaire was thrown in as a last-minute thing, and it wasn't a highlight of the release. Once Windows 3.0 launched, though, it became an instant highlight. Everyone was kind of shocked to see that the rest of the world was playing Solitaire for millions of hours, Ryan said. Nobody really expected that. So if you click around randomly in Minesweeper, you probably know that you'll lose almost immediately. And many players never actually advance past the random clicking stage, or even attempt to unravel the mystery of the grid's colorful numbers and the logical rules that can identify safe, mine-free squares. The fact that these rules are explained in Minesweeper's help file doesn't really seem to matter. In fact, just seeing numbers on a grid is enough to scare off some would-be players before they even consider asking for help. Minesweeper is a little geekier than Solitaire. It's a little mathier, Lambert said. You get people who are like, I don't like math, and I don't like Minesweeper because I don't like math. And while Minesweeper brings up images of a math test for some, Windows Solitaire often brings to mind an image of vibrant celebration. The genius of Solitaire was the closing scene, the cascading cards, Ryan said of the victory cutscene, where playing cards bounce around the screen in sequence, leaving a colorful trail as they go. People would win and go, come look at this. That was a thing. The success of Windows Solitaire taught Microsoft that, as Ryan put it, there was an appetite for games, and you could make Windows attractive. If you asked a lot of people after Windows 3.0 came out what was their favorite thing about Windows 3.0, they would tell you Solitaire. They wouldn't tell you multi-threaded multitasking or whatever. They don't care. It's Solitaire. I'm going to let this finish because it seems like a crime to cut it off. Last one. Yay! Some inside Microsoft quickly spied a marketing opportunity brewing in that kind of user reaction. We're at a time of DOS, so people say, why would I get a Windows machine? I have to go spend more money on memory and more money on my computer? I don't want to spend that extra money, Ryan said. We realized that games could really be a vehicle for showing people how the graphical user interface really works, getting people excited about it. Today, Windows controls the vast majority of the computer gaming market, with hundreds of millions of PC gamers building their rigs around the OS. Those players in the thousands of Windows games released each year can all trace a tiny thread back to the legacy of Solitaire and Minesweeper over 30 years ago. But in the Microsoft of the early 90s, convincing people that gaming would be a key part of the company's future was not an easy task. So in the early 90s, Microsoft, there was a division called the Entry Business Unit that was responsible for getting these expensive machines into people's homes rather than just businesses where they were more popular. And after Solitaire, that group wanted to capitalize on the rising interest in Windows gaming. So they put together a skunkworks project called the Windows Entertainment Pack with Minesweeper and others games that were just sitting around the internal network. Just bundle them together on a 3.5-inch or 5.25 disc, throw it out into the world. Was not a major project for Microsoft, but for the Entry Business Unit, they figured this was their way to get into homes. I'll read a little from the book again. While Microsoft's Entry Business Unit was enthusiastic about a simple Windows gaming collection, selling the Microsoft bureaucracy on the idea was far from easy. At the time, Microsoft was not filled with gamers, Ryan points out. Microsoft was filled with super serious people. I remember sitting in a meeting with one of those Windows execs who proudly proclaimed, I don't waste my time reading fiction. I only read nonfiction, as if this was a badge of pride. According to Ryan, Gates didn't watch TV or play video games, with the exception of Minesweeper. Neither did future Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer, who was then vice president of system software at the company. There was nobody at the senior level of the company, Ryan said, that spent any time playing games. Microsoft was, of course, aware that third-party developers were creating a sizable niche of games for MS-DOS, but inside Microsoft itself, there was little to no interest in helping to fill that product category directly, even after the success of Solitaire. As a company at that time, we were very much more focused on these machines as business machines, product manager Libby Duzan said. Windows and Office were absolutely our bread and butter. To fit a product like the Entertainment Pack into that Microsoft mold, the Entry Business Unit had to get creative with their internal marketing pitch. I remember vividly that our marketing plan asked, what is your target market? And we wanted to say slackers at work. But we knew slackers at work wasn't going to be an effective target market for Microsoft, so I created a euphemism for it, Ryan said. Our target market was the loosely supervised business person. Aren't we all? So there's a lot more about Windows Entertainment Pack in the book, but I'm going to jump ahead a bit to the moral panic that surrounded gaming in the 90s. And if you were around at the time, you probably remember it. You know, parents, journalists, government officials were all concerned about the negative effects of playing games like Mortal Kombat, Doom, and Minesweeper, right? These were making headlines everywhere. It seems odd to jump Minesweeper in there, but its availability on every Windows PC means it attracted a lot of unlikely players. Ender's Game author Orson Scott Card called it the most diabolically addictive game I have seen lately in a magazine review at the time. He recommended the game only to Windows owners who had enough iron self-control to get your real work done before you play. Does that describe anyone here? Oh, wow, I'm impressed. Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling used it to help quit smoking. In 2004, Rowling wrote on her personal blog that a smoking replacement like chewing gum does not give you an excuse for a nice little brain resting break. So instead, I like to escape the complexities of the latest plot by playing a quick game of Minesweeper. Rowling went on to boast that she had become rather good and achieved a record of 101 seconds on the expert level. And conservative political pundit Charles Krauthammer used a 1997 column to come forward in the spirit of public service and self-loathing to admit my own sad story. I was a Minesweeper addict. Does anyone follow Charles Krauthammer on Twitch? He's not there, I'm kidding. He's dead. Whoosh. He was less than happy about it, though. Krauthammer called the game a poisoned gift from Microsoft, a jazzed-up cyber version of the old grade school battleship game that was played long ago by wanton boys behind the math teacher's back. As a then 44-year-old with no admonishing teacher to stop him, though, Krauthammer said he had forsaken family, friends, and work in pursuit of the 100 hidden mines in the cryptic grid. So he's playing on expert, I guess. Krauthammer writes about flooding himself on Minesweeper, a process he said he previously used on addictions like coffee and chess. Like a kid punished for smoking by being forced to smoke a whole pack in one sitting, Krauthammer said he forced himself to play Minesweeper until he was sick of it. Grid after grid, I kept hitting the restart button, he writes. Long after I'd had enough, I made myself play some more, and then it broke. I'd played my final game. Triumph of the will out there. The idea that pre-installed Windows games were sapping our collective productivity was everywhere in the 90s, actually. Among a certain segment of America's business and leadership class, the conventional wisdom was that Minesweeper, Solitaire, and other pre-installed computer games were responsible for billions of dollars in stolen wages and wasted taxpayer dollars that required legislation to safeguard. More than that, the games themselves were symbols of the anxiety some felt about how quickly the computer revolution was changing how Americans worked and lived. Fitzgerald remembered that after the Windows Entertainment Package shipped at the computer industry trade show Comdex, people would walk up to him and say, "Show me what in the hell is Entertainment Pack?" Followed shortly by, "Thank you. Now I know what to remove from my users' machines." Worries about workers using paid time to goof off predate the personal computer revolution, of course. President Clinton reportedly didn't need a computer to shirk his duties. In a 1997 AP column, the president was said to be addicted to Solitaire, albeit the old-fashioned version played with actual cards. A New York Times story from that same year placed the presence of computer games at work in a grand tradition of employee behavior that includes playing cards, lingering at the water cooler, and making personal calls. Former Office of Management and Budget official Franklin S. Reeder told the Washington Post in 1997 that in the 60s, many agencies did not give employees a telephone connected to an outside line because of worries that workers were making personal calls. The policy changed, Reeder said, in part because the officials acknowledged that workers should be treated as responsible adults, and because it made no sense to have people leaving their desks to find payphones when faced with childcare or auto repair concerns. For many 90s companies, though, the idea of employees as responsible adults didn't seem to register when faced with the prospect of pre-installed computer games on every desk. Department store Sears Roebuck had all built-in games deleted from its employees' window machines, telling the Wall Street Journal in 1994 that it blamed employees playing computer games for tying up its internal computer network. Sears went on to tell the Charleston Daily Mail that the move was mainly to save disk space, which seems like a bit of a red herring considering how little disk space these games actually required. Excuse me. Boeing, Ford Motor Company, and Aetna were among the national conglomerates to follow Sears' lead, according to press reports, alongside untold small businesses dotting the country. Boston's Garber Travel Services went one step further, also deleting Windows' built-in drawing program Paint from 700 company computers, according to a 1995 Computer World article. I have to wonder if pens and paper were similarly barred because they might encourage employees to doodle on company time. Even businesses explicitly built around studying the PC worried that having games around the office might look unprofessional, especially to outsiders. Our editor wanted to lessen the dormitory feel of our offices, PC Magazine editor Tin Albano told the Washington Post in '94. Advertisers would come in and the entire research department was playing Solitaire. It did not leave the best impression. While goofing off at work wasn't a new phenomenon, some saw computer games as a new and particularly troubling way to shirk work duties. A 90s political cartoon from syndicated cartoonist Tom Towles, titled Government Efficiency Report, addressed the anxiety in Towles' distinct tongue-in-cheek style. In the first panel, a 70s government functionary is shown playing solitaire with a real deck of cards at 6 games an hour. In the next panel, a 90s worker sits at a computer where he can play as many as 17 games an hour of Windows solitaire. Managers themselves say that employees have rarely before had the opportunity to roam so far without leaving their desks, the New York Times wrote on the subject. And they see something particularly unsettling about workers' ability to slack off using the very tools with which they're supposed to be doing their jobs. The panic over solitaire and Minesweeper extended past businesses into governments, too. Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Virginia were among the state and local governments that banned pre-installed games like Minesweeper from their government computers. And the federal government got in on the act, too. The EPA, Justice, and Labor departments also barred games from their computers, according to press releases at the time. And then, in 1997, Senator Louth Faircloth, I'm not pronouncing that right, I'm sure, raised the Responsive Government Act that called for the prohibition of computer game programs from all federal computers. In a speech defending the bill on the Senate floor, Faircloth put his proposed prohibition in stark moral terms. It is absolutely ludicrous that the taxpayers are paying people to play computer games. The computers are bought and paid for the American taxpayers for work and not for fun. And they're paying, footing the bill for the job, the office, and everything. And to be using it for pleasure is simply not in keeping with the way we should be running the government. The $20 billion the federal government was spending on computers, Faircloth said, was designed to increase productivity, not to provide games and an ability to pass time while they're drawing wages as federal employees. Faircloth took particular exception to computers that are delivered already equipped with so-called games which reduce workers' efficiency and productivity. I'm not sure why he said so-called games. They're just games. Direct attack on solitaire and Minesweeper. These games, of course, do nothing but decrease productivity. There is no reason for the federal government to buy computers with programs designed to divert employees' attention from their job. This is just simply common sense. So the Responsive Government Act never became law, but it still shows how worried people in power were about little old Minesweeper. And while I don't think Minesweeper led to a productivity crisis for the world's loosely supervised business people, a lot of people did get addicted. And a lot of that addictiveness, I think, is rooted in Minesweeper's lack of predictability. So I'll read from the book a little bit more. Minesweeper's appeal relies in part on the randomization inherent to its design. While the basic rules and strategies stay the same from game to game, the specific arrangement of the mines changes with every tap of that new game's smiley face. That means the general skills gained from previous games can be useful, but any specific knowledge of how those mines were laid out previously is designed to be useless going forward. That sets Minesweeper apart from games with predetermined maps, like, say, The Legend of Zelda. In that game, the initial state of the game world is set up the same way every time, for every player. Finding a secret item or a hidden passage in a game like that can be thrilling the first time, but it's hard to recapture that thrill on subsequent playthroughs. You can't unlearn the secrets that helped make the world so compelling in the first place. Oh, there's a video here, apparently. Minesweeper's randomization, on the other hand, makes it more akin to the roguelike genre that has become increasingly popular in recent years. Named after the groundbreaking 1980 dungeon crawler Rogue. Any Rogue fans? Yeah? The genre is characterized in part by procedurally generated levels, eliminating a player's ability to memorize routes and making success in each run at least partially luck-based. Minesweeper also integrates the common roguelike feature of instant permadeath, forcing a player back to the start after a single mistake, rather than using checkpoints to save progress. Though the short length of each Minesweeper puzzle ultimately limits the frustration of this punishment, it's still there. Randomization makes Minesweeper resistant to many of the techniques that speedrunners use to solve non-random games as quickly as possible. A perfect speedrun of Super Mario Bros., and this one's pretty close, can be broken down into roughly 5-minute series of inputs. If those inputs are entered in the same order with the same precise rhythm, the game will always be completed in the same record-breaking time. A player can practice that input series thousands of times until the game becomes more a test of precise execution and memorization than strictly a reaction to what's happening on the screen. A dumb robot can and has been coded to repeat that input sequence with the correct timing, succeeding every time without needing to think. That's not so in Minesweeper, where a player, or artificial intelligence, reacts to a new arrangement of mines in each new game. The general patterns will be familiar each time, but the complete outline of a full game can't be practiced or memorized ahead of time. Each new game is its own novel test, requiring pattern recognition, quick reflexes, and on-the-fly improvisation to complete. At least, that was the intent. Ooh, what does that mean? So by the late 90s, there was a tight-knit group of players that had gathered on the internet to try and set new world records in Minesweeper. Not that surprising, that's part of what the internet is for. Those pro players knew it wasn't just skill, but the luck born of the game's randomization that played into that. So I'm going to play a video here of a world record place Minesweeper game and see if you can keep up just visually with how quick this is. There you go. Easy game, right? Yeah, I can clap for that. So obviously, this is top-level play. Oh, show that again. So obviously, it's top-level play, but it's helped by, as you'll see, all those huge blank areas that open up with a single click. More required clicks means more time, even for top-level players. So to get a record time, you don't just need skill, you need to first load a record-settable board, like this one. The community even came up with a number called Bechtel's board benchmark value, or 3BV, to measure the minimum number of clicks a board would take and find those record-ready boards. And it was important to have a way to compare different boards because, and I'll read from the book here, if you do the math, it seems functionally impossible that any two players will ever encounter the same exact Minesweeper board in their lifetimes. The permutations involved in a truly randomized Minesweeper are mind-numbing. So take the intermediate game. It's a simple 16 by 16 grid with 40 mines. There are precisely this many possible random mine configurations on such a board. That's nearly 105 quattordecillion, or 105 billion, to put it in terms that sounds like a 6-year-old made them up. It's hard to wrap a human brain around just how big that number is, so I'm going to give you some context. Let's say there was a planet of 8 billion people, spent all their entirety of their 80-year lives starting a new game of Minesweeper every single second from birth to death. These are really advanced, supremely healthy babies who don't need to eat or sleep, okay? That entire planet of Minesweeper monomaniacs would start this many games in that 80-year span, only about 20 quintillion. To see every possible intermediate Minesweeper board arrangement, assuming a version of the game programmed to never deliver a duplicate board to anyone ever, you would need well over 5 octillion such planets. 5 followed by 27 zeros, each full of sleepless, foodless Minesweeper addicts playing for their entire lives. The numbers involved in the expert game are even larger and left as an exercise to the reader. And if you do calculate those numbers, come see me after class for extra credit. All those big numbers should make it clear just how astronomically unlikely it was that 2 Minesweeper players should ever stumble on the exact same random arrangement of mines. Sure, competing players might run into largely similar boards, or boards that reduce to the same 3BV difficulty heuristic, but the laws of randomness and probability suggest clicking the new game button should always generate a board that has literally never been seen before in Minesweeper history. So imagine the Minesweeper community's surprise when multiple players discovered in quick succession that they were setting records on completely identical boards. This is the board right there. It would come to be called the Dream Board, both for its record-setting potential and because every player could actually dream of getting it. The store-chasing community eventually discovered, after a lot of testing, that this board appears roughly every 15,000 new games, thanks to a quirk in the original Minesweeper's random number generator. So if you knew it was coming and you knew to get boards before it to look for, and you knew where to click, you could set a world-beating time without using any Minesweeper skills. You just knew exactly where the big open holes were, and you could play it, just like Super Mario Brothers, except with a lot less effort. So this led to a bit of an existential crisis in the Minesweeper community. but I have to leave something for you to read in the book itself, because I hope you will buy it. So there's plenty more in there about the Dream Board and what it did to competitive Minesweeper, about the road to releasing the game, the modern version of the game on Windows 8, which includes an adventure mode. Has anyone played Minesweeper Adventure Mode? Yeah, a few people. It's pretty fun. You should look into it. Also the game's legacy, its clones. There's a lot of stuff in there. But I'll save that for now. Right now the book is available. You can use that QR code to buy it, and that'll give you 15% off. I also have some physical copies here if people want to come and buy it. I'll even sign it if you want it to be worth a little less money. And you can come up and see I got the Windows Entertainment Pack here from my personal collection if you want to see some really bad Minesweeper copy on the back. And I'll take questions now if you guys have them. Thanks. I don't know if we have a microphone for questions or if we just call them out. Go ahead.
Apologies if you said this and I missed it, but what is your personal connection to Minesweeper? What started this project in the first place?
What is my personal connection to Minesweeper? I learned the game when I was about 9 years old. I was at my mom's office for one of those days when you couldn't find childcare, and I tried clicking around randomly, and I thought, oh, this game is stupid. And then my mom came in and said, what are you doing? And she showed me actually how to play Minesweeper. And then I spent, the rest of the day just logicking out all the rules. I felt like the smartest 9-year-old in history because I figured out how to do that. So it always reminds me of my mom and, her taking time out of her busy day for that. And, I've played, I'm not an expert level player. I'm not setting world records or anything, but I've had, months-long addictions on and off for the past 30 years. I'll like Charles Krauthammer, I'll gorge myself on the game, and then a few years later I'll be like, oh, Minesweeper, I remember I loved that game. And then I'll play it for a few more months, and then I'll get bored again. And every time I think I get a little better, but maybe I'm just forgetting what it was like before. And then when I was thinking, Boss Fight Books called out for books, and I did some research, and I found, some of the stuff that I talked about in here, and I thought, no one's ever written about this. I think the ratio of hours played to words written about Minesweeper, I don't think any game has that beat, because everyone played it and no one wrote about it. So I wanted to solve that a little bit, and I hope the book does that. Yes?
Is there any deep background on the little smiley face?
Is there any deep background on the smiley face in the old version? I think Robert Donner mentioned that he added that in. He didn't have any particular thing to say about it. He said that it was more interesting than a new game, but he was quite proud of the little sunglasses that you get on the icon when you win a game. He thought that was a nice little touch. Beyond that, no, there wasn't really anything else. Yes? I spent, how long did the interviews take for this book? I spent probably, 10 hours interviewing, a few dozen people, 10 or 20 hours interviewing, but it really, the transcribing and the writing of everything took a lot more time. I took a few months off of work to really focus on it. And, I think it turned out okay. Yes?
Do you know what the negative response from executives is one of the reasons Microsoft kind of de-emphasized Minesweeper?
Is the negative response from executives why Minesweeper is de-emphasized and not included on Windows 10, I guess? Actually, they said that when they were creating Windows 8, rather, where the first one that it wasn't on, I think, they said that they were introducing the Microsoft Store, the Windows Store, and they wanted a way to get people into the store. And they thought, oh, well, people love Solitaire and Minesweeper. If we don't include Solitaire and Minesweeper, they'll go to the store and download the free versions there, and then they'll know how to use the store. And people did that, but they were not happy. They did not want to go through those extra steps. So they eventually added Solitaire back in because people were up in arms that Windows did not have Solitaire. But Minesweeper, they decided it wasn't popular enough to add back in once it had been removed. And, there's really a lot of competition for those pre-installed start menu slots these days. So are you going to put Minesweeper in instead of, Mail or Word or WordPad, whatever? So it doesn't look likely that it's going to become as ubiquitous as it once was, unfortunately. Yes? Are there any open source Minesweeper clones I recommend? If you go to Google and type in Minesweeper, there will be a version you can play in the Google window. They also created an open source version, I think, just to show that HTML5 programming was really easy, and I forget what it's called, but Prox it's called. I talk about that in the book a bit. And, everyone has cloned Minesweeper. There's a version for, the Xbox 360, there's versions for graphing calculators, there's probably a version for your fridge now. It's one of those games that people use as like a programming exercise at this point. Yes? What was the most surprising thing I discovered when researching this book? It might be that excerpt with Melinda Gates saying that Bill needed to stop playing Minesweeper because it was hurting Microsoft. But really, it was probably actually the existence of the competitive community. I shouldn't be surprised that Minesweeper has it because anything with a high score list that's popular is going to have people competing over it. But I spend a lot of time in the book looking at kind of the forum drama that developed over the Dreamboard and all these people fighting it out. And I'm sure you guys are members of fandoms that have similar things, but to see it for Minesweeper was just a little bit mind-blowing when I was doing the research. Anything else? Yes?
Did you look into the PC Engine Minesweeper at all?
The PC Engine Minesweeper, I did see that in my research, but it did not really factor into the book, honestly. Is there something... Have you played it much? Yeah, I played it on an emulator, and I was like, yeah, it's Minesweeper. I don't really know. That doesn't seem like anything interesting to write in the book about it, unfortunately. But, there's also a Game Boy Color version that was part of the entertainment pack there. It's really weird, some of the Minesweepers out there. Yes? How badly did I want to interview Bill Gates about his Minesweeper addiction? That would have been really good. That would have added a lot to the book, but I think he's a little busy, trying to save the world with all his philanthropy or whatever. He did not deign to interview me, but a lot of early Microsoft employees did, and I'm glad I got to them, actually, because they're not going to be around forever, and I'm glad I could capture some of what it was like in early 90s Microsoft. Well, I still can, and I hope more people, historians out there, actually talk to these early game designers before they're gone, because this is the time to do it. They're starting to forget things, and they're starting to lose things, and they're starting to not be around anymore for one reason or another. So, I hope it inspires someone to do more of this stuff. Anyone else? What should you do if you have to guess and there's equal likelihood that either one is a mine? I actually talk about this a little bit in the book. It's not a strategy guide, but that little bit is in there. The expert players will tell you, do not think about it. Do not waste 100 seconds just staring at it, trying to intuit it out. Just pick it as soon as you see that. As soon as you know that no more information is going to help you, click it. And if you're wrong, great, you get to start a new game right away. And if you're right, great, you can keep going. And there's probably something poetic about that, but I'll leave that to the poets. Just go for it and don't think about it.
You never tried to fix that?
There are versions that do fix that. There are ones, you can find them online pretty easily, actually, where it's no randomization, where they design the board so that no guessing is ever required. Microsoft, no, they did not care at all. No, for most of the history of Minesweeper, it was kind of this vestigial appendage that, it was in Windows 3.1, so it was in Windows 95, so it was in Windows XP. Everyone just kept moving it forward, but, there was no Minesweeper czar at Microsoft until very recently, actually. Any more? All right, thanks again. If you can come up and talk if you want. Like I said, I have copies of the book, and thanks for coming out. Hope you have a good MAGFest.